Yo, what is up, Valorant addicts? I hope you guys are doing good. Today we're going to be taking a look at the newest addition into Valorant, Veto, and kind of take a look at all his abilities and how, in my opinion, this guy should be played in a ranked or scrim setting. Obviously, there has been a lot of content released in terms of how the new agent can or should be played, and I kind of want to give you guys my take on how the agent can be played, and maybe give you guys some ideas on what you can do differently, what you maybe have not seen so far, especially with all the new nerfs for a lot of agents. I feel like Veto is going to be in a very viable place, especially with utility being so important or costly now. I feel like if you play him correctly, he could get insanely strong. So that's kind of what we're going to be taking a look at for today. So let's hop right into it and leave me some feedback in the comments. While we are loading into this video, I kind of wanted to let you guys know that the initial plan was to edit the video a bit more, but I feel like if you are watching this, general chances are pretty high that you're more interested about the content anyways, so don't mind me if the visuals seem a bit boring, just stick around and we'll get right into it. To kind of start off, the general idea is to split this video into 4 parts along his abilities. We're going to kind of split the video into his intercept, into his E, into his trap, into his TP, and then also his ultimate, and kind of take a look at all these 4 individual abilities and then talk about them a bit by bit, and then kind of go through them and see what makes them pretty strong, or how in my opinion they should be used, because some stuff I haven't really seen, some stuff I have also seen some other content creators talk about, but in general the idea is kind of to go utility by utility to see what makes them strong, and then you guys can kind of adapt and create your own plays or your own setups with this new agent. If we kind of want to take a first look at Veto's E abilities, intercept, what usually happens, I assume you guys have seen this in ranked as well, is that Veto just sets up on any side of the map and then puts his intercept above the choke, right? You've seen this probably a lot of times, and generally the intercept above the choke also delays for a good amount, and it is a viable option how to play this agent, but I feel like he has more potential in terms of what you can do with this ability than just placing it above a side's choke and then kind of playing with that only. I feel like especially on maps like Lotus or Sunset, but also some other maps in the game, there's more potential to this ability that you can use than to just have it above his side hold or above a choke. Clove, whatever smoker you are playing. Oh, Digga, deine Mutter! Instead of just having the intercept above the side choke, what this utility also allows us to do is fight for more map control by denying opponent utility that they would use to take this amount of map control. What usually happens on maps like Lotus or Sunset is that at the start of the round, teams tend to fight for either rubble or mount control. And especially with our ability that denies enemy utility, it gives us a huge advantage in terms of fighting for the space. Usually, if you want to hold onto either of those spaces, you probably need 2 to probably 3 people to fight for this space. Veto kind of allows you to do it alone, or at least with one other person. So let's say we're getting an Omen one way, or whichever controller you're playing, to support your side hold, and you place your intercept in a spot where it's really hard to shoot if you don't disrespect the one way. This kind of allows Veto to then keep this mount control kind of alone, because any other utility that might get thrown, let it be a feint hold for example, that could be thrown up here or deep, a race nade, a flash, whatever utility there might be that goes towards Veto's direction, just gets broken with the activation of his intercept, right? This kind of also allows Veto to play a bit more aggressive, because he does have the cover of the one way, to then potentially TP back, and then get out and play a different angle after, right? The combination of a one way in a spot where enemy has to contest with utility and his intercept gives you insane amounts of potential on keeping space with very few people and very few utility costs that you would normally need to commit a lot more for. This kind of gives you is that after using his intercept pretty early and denying the space for a good amount of time and kind of keeping the space for some time and then having to fall back after some time, this kind of allows Veto to then regain his intercept after 45 seconds. Because let's assume he's keeping the space, holding the one way and then denying some enemy utility, especially with all the new agent nerfs of the Fade cooldown to 60 seconds, the Sova recon to 60 seconds, Gecko flashes being reduced in time, or technically being upped in time, and all this. This kind of gives Veto, but also your enemy or your team, time to rotate and kind of stack towards C side. With this time that Veto gets after TPing back, he has enough time to regain his intercept to then place it above the choke. So instead of initially setting up above the choke and just having this set up for the entirety of the round, you can kind of turn this into a two-phase setup for where in phase 1 you kind of have like an aggro setup where you keep C mount space, and then after you fall back, and then in phase 2 you have like a more passive setup, right, where you then fall back onto side and try to keep side space and kind of more fall back into an anchor position. This has two good like advantages. Apart from just keeping the map space and keeping more map control, this also just objectively gets rid of more utility, right? You kind of deny utility on mount and then you deny utility on side. So this either stalls for longer or it denies more utility, which just gets you more value for your own ability than just initially having it above the side choke. This also works for A if you're trying to aggress A, trying to break some utility, especially if you're trying to push aggressively. You can deny fade horns, you can deny race nades, flashes, whatever there might be. And this also obviously vice versa works on attack, which we're going to be taking a look at as well. Okay, if we're going to be looking at this on attack as well, the idea kind of works similarly, right? In spaces that enemies usually have to contest with utility, which is for example a rubble, this E ability gives you an insane advantage in taking early space. Apart from Veto being able to be an agent that can default on his own as well with his TPs, the idea of his interceptor is to just deny any early utility that could come to contest this space. Simply having his interceptor up at the start of the round, which you get back after 45 seconds, allows you to deny any potential race nades, fade utility, or any other util that usually enemy need to contest this space. So his intercept alone kind of gives you the chance to win the A-Rubber fight every single round, unless the enemy team is also playing a Veto and plays for the same idea. But in general, this works insanely well on attack as well. Other maps this works great on is, for example, Sunset. Sunset, especially with a main, has kind of a similar idea. Having his intercept used aggressive in a main as well, like on attack as well as on defense, kind of works the same. Usually this is a space that enemies need to commit util on to kind of contest. So on defense or on attack, his intercept that you would activate early just denies any utility like flashes, neon stuns, or any other stuff except for maybe a paranoia or a breach stun. So this alone, especially if you play against the double duelist comp with like a Euro Neon, gives you an insane advantage in terms of fighting for this early space. This obviously works on attack as well as on defense. You just have to get good at deciding where you should place your interceptor, where it gets the majority of the utility that can be broken, but also doesn't get broken easily at the same time. The next thing we kind of want to take a look at is his TP. Obviously, when you kind of first play Veto, his TP feels similar, or he himself feels similar to play like a chamber with his trap, with his TP, but he plays vastly different. His TP isn't a get out of jail free card, where you can play one and done spots and just get out fast with your TP like a Euro or a chamber, but this TP more so has to be placed very smartly. There's kind of two things you can do with this. The first thing you can do is kind of use it for rotation, which in my opinion is probably the strongest thing you can use it for, right? To kind of get a good idea of how a rotation should be abused with this agent, especially on defense, you want to chain your TPs. I'm assuming you've probably heard this before, especially if you're interested in Veto. How this could, for example, be looking is if you have a Veto TP placed towards A link, close to B side, and then have your second TP in the pre-round placed somewhere towards garage. What this allows you to do is you could, for example, start anywhere in this area on A short, or also technically fall back and play on site, and then if you would have to, in a matter of very few seconds, rotate pretty fast in maybe 5 to 10 seconds towards the C side. The advantage setting your TPs up for rotation, which it gives you, is you are kind of allowed to have insanely good map presence. What map presence means is that you can be at different spots on the map at the same time. It kind of feels similar to a Euro, with the advantage of you being able to kind of have your TP up for the entirety of the round, unless you need to use them. Euro's TPs kind of expire after some time, which Veto's TPs don't. Therefore, you can kind of stay and anchor aside and just have a pretty fast late rotate. The second thing that Veto's TPs are pretty good at is isolating angles. What this kind of means is that you can still use it similar to a chamber TP with obviously longer TP time, so you just have to be more careful about what angles to choose. Angles where you can take an aggressive fight and then duck into cover to TP out are usually preferred for this. So let's say you have a TP on A short, or even on the box, or whatever you might want to choose it. You can still take a fight from an aggressive angle or long, then duck forwards into cover to then after TP out, right? And this kind of works on multiple spots on the map, but in general, using the TP to isolate angles and then TPing out still works. But in general, I would say that using them for rotation and still using them to technically get some advantages by being able to play short is probably better just using it for isolating angles and then trying to TP out. Okay, the third thing, in my opinion, that Veto's TPs can be used pretty well for is repositioning. I kind of want to shout out Imi, the C9 coach here, for the setup. I kind of stole this from him, where he uses a trap either towards B or more likely towards garage, where you op on Veto, where you initially set up on top of Gen on site by using a TP pre-round, then setting it up, and then you can set one of your TPs up towards plat and have your second TP set up towards the back of site. What this allows you to do is, with an operator, technically also Vandal, but preferably an operator, you're able to set up on top of Gen, take an initial fight, then reposition to the side of Gen, then take another fight with the op, and then reposition again to the back of site and potentially leave side, or wait for your team to flood and kind of help you on site. These repositions work especially well if you're playing an operator, technically also a judge, but preferably an operator where you kind of, after taking a shot, want to instantly reposition to kind of get an advantage when you're trying to re-peek, so you don't have to re-peek from the same angle that you're probably getting held from. Kind of the last thing that you can do with his TP is using him to default on tech or to keep map space on defense. This is pretty map dependent, but technically you can use his insane TP range to set him up on different sides or on different aggro positions where he can get out safely after taking a fight. This being pretty map dependent, you have to find good situations for him, but I feel like the most common one that has also been used already by players like Demon 1 is trying to set Veto up on rubble. How this would work is pre-barrier, or pre-round, you could set your TP up in tree, and then have Veto start with either a trap on B or a trap on A towards A, and then kind of use his intercept early to fight for the space, or just instantly use a TP to get him up onto rubble. This kind of lets you TP out onto rubble and take an aggressive fight with teammates utility that supports you. Now, if needed, after taking this fight, you are at any point able to just go back out, use your TP, which gives you a lot of range, as you can see here, to play aggressive towards A. Especially TPs that you can set up pre-round that give you an insane amount of space are pretty good to use. This obviously being map dependent, but for example on Lotus it can be used insanely well. Same goes for attack, where you can technically use Veto to, at the start of the round, just default towards A with the TP behind rubble. There obviously are maps as well where you can't really use the TP early to kind of default with him or set him up in good spots. For example, Haven is a map where, in my opinion, except for maybe a TP towards short, it's really difficult for Veto to be set up in a pretty good spot. So in my opinion, you should there use his TPs, same as on defense, to kind of chain them together. This kind of works for insanely fast rotates, or for late lurks with the potential to then rotate if needed. So let's say at the start of the round you start towards A and you set up your TPs and your trap towards A and towards mid. What this allows you to do is, if you set them up right, with maybe a trap towards here and then a TP towards this corner on A and a TP towards bottom mid, to technically play up and short, go for a late pick while your team is kind of splitting on towards C, and then after putting some pressure from a short, instantly rotate with your TPs towards garage and then pivot. This kind of gives you the chance to late lurk on attack and still have good impact on the side when your team is already hitting the side or rotating towards the side, and just allows you to, in 1v1 clutches into v2 situations, show presence somewhere on the map, like A short or A long, and then have an insanely fast rotate towards garage or towards C, and kind of get the round for free if you play it out correctly. The advantage that this trip gives you is that you are able to throw it. Unlike a chamber trademark or a killjoy alarm bot, you are able to throw this trip, and therefore it gives you just a lot more options of what you can do with this. Being able to throw the trip just does give you a lot more options and limits you less in terms of how you want to use the ability. So for example, options that this kind of gives you is to use the ability to throw it towards short, then still technically have it as a trip, right, for some map space, but then also deny more map space that initially defenders would want to contest, right? If they're trying to fight for short and the trip gets thrown down, they either have to break it, which kind of gives you info that they're fighting for a short, but that also kind of gives you the chance for, if they do not break it, to just keep deep map space on the side. The second thing that his trip can get used at is for just doing fast XX. This trip, which catches you, decays you, and then also deafens you, is insanely strong to not throw into chokes or into the smokes and chokes, but right in front of them. So let's say you're doing a fast CXX in the rank game where you just drop a normal garage smoke, normal CT smoke. If you do have a trip lineup that lands in front of the CT smoke, this kind of does two things for you. First of all, it denies anybody on defense wanting to leave side because they get caught by the trip, deafened and then stuck for a solid amount. But this also denies anyone flooding back into the side because as soon as they try to, they get hit by the trip, decayed and deafened, which kind of makes it really hard for them to flood and then support their teammates. So in my opinion, the best use case for the trip is to use it on fast XX if you are doing one, to then use it in front of chokes like this or like this, whichever you'd like. Obviously you would have to need some lineups prepared for this, but this kind of gives you a better chance of taking the side and denying a flood. This works pretty similarly to the KJ Viper comp that uses the same idea with the Viper Orb and the KJ Molly on C. Last but not least, we kind of want to take a look at his ultimate before we kind of go over the maps that he, in my opinion, is pretty strong on. If we look at his ultimate, in my opinion, this ult should always be used with one of the two situations. Either you should use this ult to kind of set up a set play on defense, where you use your teammate's utility, especially flashes, or utility like mollies or stuns that you could disrespect and then push somewhere aggressively. Or the second option, which in my opinion is probably the better way on how to use this ult, is to buy an operator with it. Why buy an op? The advantages that this ult gives you is that it denies some utility or also the information from some utility. Which means if at the start of the round you set up a TP, let it be somewhere towards the heaven, and then at the start of the round you kind of position yourself to the right, close to Hobbit, close to Breakable with an operator. Any utility that normally gets thrown to contest the space is probably a Fade Eye. This Fade Eye landing here and not getting shot gives the enemy kind of false security that this space that they've just thrown the Fade Eye for is clear, while you are not being able to be tagged in your ult by abilities like Sova Darts or Fade Eyes. This false sense of security just lets them run straight up into your op and gives you kind of free picks. And this, in my opinion, is kind of how his ult can be abused pretty well on defense, but technically also ops. Disrespecting spaces where they regularly lose Fade Eyes, Sova Darts, any central util or any initiator util that you don't get scanned by is, in my opinion, how you should be using this ultimate effectively. Okay, to kind of finish this video off, I want to go over the maps pretty quickly to not make this video longer than it already is. What is really important to keep in mind is that with all the agent nerfs that have been officially released, or that at least we have the information about, I feel like Veto will be in a pretty good spot on any map. So he will be viable to play on any map, in my opinion, especially with the importance of utility being so high at the moment. I feel like Abyss is one of his worst maps, still playable, but one of his worst. I feel like on Ascent, Killjoy will get more play than him. He is still a good option. I think Bind is one of his better maps, especially with all the TP options that there are. Same goes for Corrode, especially with the chance to, from A, have a pretty quick rotate towards top mid, or towards B. He's definitely a viable option. I still think there are better maps for him. If I would kind of have to go over his best maps in my opinion, I would probably say Bind is one of his better maps. Haven is one of his better maps. Lotus, in my opinion, probably one of his best maps with all the stuff that we went about. And then probably Sunset, Split and Pearl, also some of his better maps. So with the new patches of Split and Pearl coming back in, I feel like he's in a pretty good spot and very playable on all of those maps. I would probably say his best are probably Lotus and Sunset, with a close follow on maybe Split and Bind behind. And that kind of sums it all up. I want to thank you guys for following along with me. I feel like Veto is in a pretty good spot at the moment, especially with utility cost being so high. So I want to thank you guys for following this video alongside of me. Drop me some comments on what I can improve, and then I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.